Last year, I went and played Parasite Eve for the first time. This year, I decided to play its sequel, Parasite Eve 2, and in today's video, I am going to be giving you my thoughts and opinions of my first playthrough of Parasite Eve 2. So with that all being said, what is up guys, Jen here, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. As always, got you covered with timestamps down below, so if there's a certain section you would like to skip to, feel free. All I ask is you to support the channel and hit the like button, and if you want to stick around for some more retro RPG content, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. Now before we go into Parasite Eve 2, this was another game that I streamed over on Twitch. I had a really good time, really good vibes, did it during the month of October because it was Halloween. It felt like it was the right type of game to play. But if you want to keep up to date of games that might be coming up on the channel in a review format, then please go visit the Twitch channel and see me play some of these games live for the first time. So we're going to move on straight to the story of Parasite Eve 2, and I am going to take the synopsis from the box art to set the scene. An evil breed of neo-mitochondrian creatures have taken over Acropolis Tower, eliminating everyone who stands in its way. The situation is getting out of hand, and the Los Angeles Police Department desperately needs your help. As MIST, Mitochondrian Investigation and Suppression Team, Special Agent Aya Brea, you are assigned by the FBI to embark on an investigation that takes you from downtown Los Angeles to a sinister research center deep under the Mojave Desert. You must stop this new breed of creatures that threatens to eliminate the entire human race. So yeah, it pretty much takes place after Parasite Eve 2. We are again stepping in the role of Aya Brea. Things have developed. We are now in a specialist team that deals with the mitochondrian. That deals with the mitochondrian. That deals with the mitochondrian threats that are out there. Yes, I finally got it. And we are embarking on quite the journey this time around. And not only that, we are unraveling the story of Aya Brea just that little bit more. My overall thoughts, it's probably going to become quite a common thing here with Parasite Eve 2. I thought it was really strong in the beginning, but after its second half and as we get into the end game, it kind of lost me just a little bit. And it's the same with the characters. We've got a new cast of characters here. There's no one really returning from the first game except our main character, but we've got a cast of characters that we can have a look at here. The main ones to note for me is Pierce, who we kind of get an interaction with quite a lot in the beginning of the game, but kind of like falls off. We've got Rupert that assists us here and there, and then we've got a character that assists us more in the late game and becomes quite prominent in the story, and that's Kyle. With Parasite Eve, there are multiple endings. I think there's 3. I don't know if there's more, but I got your generic ending, and I went up on YouTube to look at the other endings as well, just to get a bit more lore, and I think I would have probably been in the same boat regardless of what ending I got. But yeah, for those that want to sort those endings out, you've got to do different things within the game. You'll be able to navigate yourself through to those endings. Right, let's get straight into the gameplay of Parasite Eve 2, and I want to kind of set the vibe first, because the vibe with Parasite Eve 1, it was essentially like a Resident Evil RPG in a sense, but they didn't really hit all the bases when it came to survival horror. Now when it comes to Parasite Eve 2, I really think that they did hit the mark here, especially during the beginning. There is a really cool scene as you progress towards the tower where it's a mix between gameplay and CG cutscenes. Now Final Fantasy, especially in the PS1 era, really did this well, but the way Parasite Eve does this is that I can go back and forth and the FMV plays alongside of me, so it really immerses you in the threat and all these emergency vehicles that are at the scene. It did a really good job of setting the scene, and it did keep that up. The vibe was really feeling survival horror for a majority of the game. As for exploration, not much more removed from the first game. There are things that you can find. You really need need to interact with everything that you come across because there's no like sparkly things except for the key items. But if you want to find some ammo, a weapon, some medical items, you do need to interact with everything around you. And not only that, there are some key items that aren't as obvious as what they would be with a sparkle indicating where they are. So you really need to interact with everything here in Parasite Eve 2. Now, Parasite Eve 2 really tried to hit the nail on the head of being a lot like Resident Evil in its survival horror. It tried something else here as well, which I kind of was like, oh, okay, I'm into this, but then slowly started to get frustrated as more and more got introduced towards the end of the game, and that's the puzzles. There is a certain part of the game where you kind of go in this museum and it introduces a lot of puzzles at the same time, and you really need to think about how to tackle these puzzles, even to the point that if you carry on one of the puzzles, you can unlock a secret boss. But the puzzles that are here started off quite nice and really complemented the gameplay, but as it went on, it started to get just a little bit frustrating trying to find the answers to these. And that might just be me being very bad at solving puzzles, but the more and more that it just came across, I was like, no, thank you. I just want to get through the game now, please. Another thing that I really liked about Parasite Eve 2 was its variation of locale. Now, Parasite Eve 1 pretty much takes place in the same place and you go to the same locations. There's a few other warehouses that you can visit with a few crab enemies here or there that you might not need to go against for the full game, but they're there anyway if you want a nice weapon. But Parasite Eve 2 allows you to go to different locations. As I said in the synopsis, we start off in Los Angeles, we go to the Acropolis Tower, we then go to the Mojave Desert, and then we go to this really cool museum that made Parasite Eve 2 feel suddenly like a RPG, a fantasy RPG, which was crazy. And then we kind of follow the Resident Evil trope of ending up in a laboratory, and I do feel like this was the weakest area for me personally when it came to Parasite Eve 2, which is a shame because this is essentially the end game. Enough of gameplay, let's talk combat. Again, Parasite Eve 2 in my mind does combat a lot better. I like the more flexibility, the more freedom, the more strategic approach that you can apply when doing battles in Parasite Eve 2. That being said though, I did find myself when it came to boss battles going for the same technique of just knowing their patterns and running around in circles. Whether this is a strategy or not, I don't know, but I did find myself really doing the same things again and again. There are also some frustrating scenarios you're put in where you really can't find a way to avoid or evade attacks, so you just kind of have to go brute force and heal when needed. But the PE abilities here, I found myself using a lot more than I did in Parasite Eve 1. I wanted to use the stat buffs, I wanted to use the attacks that certain enemies were weak against, and I really dove in, leveled these up. Of course, I leveled up my healing abilities first because I felt like they were the most crucial, because they did not give us so many medical items to begin off with, so it made sense. But the PE abilities here probably were at the strongest in Parasite Eve 2. I ended up sticking with one gun. When I found it, it was just an automatic rifle that you get on quite early on when you go to the gas station, I think, and I didn't really experiment with other weapons. I just stuck with that, used the ammo that was necessary. You can get other types of ammo for guns that can change certain statistics when battling in Parasite Eve 2, but the customization was quite at a minimum here. And I think that's about everything when it comes to the combat of Parasite Eve 2. I think if I was to nutshell Parasite Eve 2, taking all of its elements and just my experience, is that I really feel it had such a strong start until we got to that research facility, and then for me personally, things kind of went downhill, and that was all aspect, gameplay and story. I was getting a little bit confused. I had to take a moment to take things in. Even though Parasite Eve as a whole, the story's quite convoluted and you really need to hit all the beats to understand it, I did understand the story, but I was like, I don't know what's going on really, and I don't know why we're doing this and why we're here. And yeah, so that's where I found myself when it came to Parasite Eve 2. I think it's a great first act, but it kind of falls off. But one thing that didn't fall off for me was the soundtrack. It was nice to hear certain beats from Parasite Eve 1 remixed in Parasite Eve 2. Not only that, I felt like music was used more often to really set the scene. There was a lot of moments in Parasite Eve 1 where it is just silence, but here we have some bass lines that kind of drive up suspense and a few tracks that you just kind of vibe out to when you kind of go into the shops and talking to NPCs along the way that I really enjoyed. And that, as we say, is that Parasite Eve 2. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. In my mind, I think it's the better Parasite Eve, but only for half the game. I do enjoy its systems, and I really hope that one day that this gets a worthwhile sequel. I know that there's one on the PSP, and maybe we'll tackle it, but I really think that there's something special here with Parasite Eve as a whole. The survival horror genre mixed in with a turn-based RPG and mechanics included as well. It really can work, and I'm hoping that one day we can have the perfect mishmash of these styles and we can all be living in it. But I'm more interested, did you enjoy Parasite Eve 2? Let me know in the comment section down below. I appreciate your time, and until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.